When you are lord of the land, there's many adulting responsibilities.
This is true. Being a landlord, there's a ton of things you need to think about. Some things like maintaining the property. Snow removal is typically the landlord's responsibility. Landlord-tenant law, but one thing that gets a lot of people that can become very tricky is the lead paint compliance laws that you need to know about if you're going to rent out your property.
I used to eat lead paint when I was a kid.
That's why we need to talk about this. It's very serious. So lead paint compliance law, a lot of our homes in Massachusetts are older, they contain lead paint, and when you rent out your property, you have to make sure that it's in compliance, which means if you have kids under the age of 6 living in your rental property, it's your responsibility as a landlord to make sure that you have a certificate of compliance. And this is where it gets tricky because it can be very expensive if you have a house with lead paint and it needs to be brought into compliance. A few things you need to know are you cannot refuse to rent to people because they have kids under 6 just because you don't want to get the lead paint compliance certificate. If you have a tenant who maybe they don't have kids when they move in, but then all of a sudden they do, you're still responsible for making sure that it's brought into compliance.
But what if you're a landlord and you don't like people or children equally? Does that matter?
Then you shouldn't be a landlord.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay.
When you rent out your property, one thing you want to remember is you're going to make some profit, but you have to reinvest in your business.
Right, because besides just your mortgage payment, you're also going to have utilities, water and sewer, repairs. You also want to think about what if the property is vacant for a little while. You need to cover those expenses as well. So thinking about every month you're collecting rent, you want to make sure that you take a certain amount of money and put it aside to cover all those expenses. Some people say it's 10% of the gross rent. Some people say it's 1.5 times a month's rent per year. Other people say $1 per square foot for the house. You hear all these different things. The point is just make sure that you're thinking about all these extra expenses, because if things come up, you want to make sure that you have a little cushion to help you get through those expenses.
It's not really when they come up, Susan. They will.
They will come up.
It's not when, it will come up.
It
right?
will,
I
right.
mean, that's the thing. And the way I judge is not the dollar or square footer thing. It's how much money do I want to take out of my savings account? And that's usually zero.
Zero, right.